Welcome to Consciously Inspired Minds. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Sue Burnett. And Sue is the owner and CEO of Monarch Financial Services. So I met Sue, Sue, this was probably 2018. 2018 when we were
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Maybe it was maybe it was in 2019. And it was the winter of 2019 because I remember it was cold outside and rainy. Anyway, we were at a community event. A business was launching and you had just started your business at the time. And my husband and I were there because he had just started his business the year before. So we were just in that way finding connection and comparing notes, and really took the opportunity to really get to know each other that evening and connect. And we've just stayed in touch ever since. We live in the same community. I really was excited to have you on today. I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording here, but just your involvement in the community and how present you are and how much you show up in the community is obviously such a strong value for you. And I really am excited for you to share what that means to you with our listeners today. Just to get things kicked off, a brief introduction about Sue. So Sue has been a pension actuary for over 30 years, designing retirement plans for businesses with anywhere from one person all the way up to 50,000 or more. She is also a licensed independent life insurance agent and an independent investment advisor representative. But her focus is in retirement plans and helping business owners decide which of the 9 retirement plan options is best for them. Monarch was founded as a way to combine Sue's financial background with her passion for helping and educating people. Her independence allows her to sift through a wide range of possibilities and base her recommendations on the one thing that matters most, which is her clients' goals, objectives, and dreams. And I also have to say that my husband and I use Sue's services, and she's been wonderful and so helpful to us. So just yet another reason why I'm excited to have her on today. But where I really want to lean in here, Sue, is I want to talk a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing. This is how we usually kick off the show, and to get a better understanding of how your childhood experience may have led you to where you are today. But with that, I also just want to make an important note to our listeners. Sue is also the author of her book called The Poppy Principles. And this book is all around her grandfather and living your life to leave a legacy. And so I definitely want to get into that and talk more about what those Poppy principles are, what they mean to you, and how they've had impact in your life and continue to make impact in that generational up level that we were talking about as well, and how you're kind of passing that on to your sons as well, which we'll get more into that. But Sue, I'd love to, again, kick things off. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and how that may have made impact into where you are today.
Sure. Yes, I'm very excited to be here. So I love what you're doing, and I love finding out what inspires other people, because I think sometimes that ricochets into different things that can inspire us. So I grew up in upstate New York, outside of Albany. So the Adirondacks, Lake Placid, if you're an Olympics fan, Saratoga Racetrack, if you're a horse fan. And I was the 4th of 5 children. I have 3 older sisters and a little brother. My dad passed away when I was 5 years old. And so I don't really remember him, but I do remember my mom telling my brother and I that he passed away. My brother was 3 at the time, and both of us crying because everyone else was crying, but we didn't quite know why we were crying, because at 5 years old, what does that really mean, right? And then my brother got tired of crying and he looked at her and he said, "So can I have breakfast now?" Right? So that was the intro to my dad. But like I said, I don't really remember him that much. My mom raised all of us. She had been a stay-at-home mom, and she's an RN by trade. So she's a nurse. And she went back to work as the school nurse, figuring that if she had our hours, then when snow days hit, she'd be home. So she was the nurse at our school, which was great in some ways and not so great in others because she was friends with all the teachers and she knew what all of us were doing at every given time. So we had to be on our best behavior, which wasn't too difficult. So after my dad had passed away, so there's five of us running around, two teenagers, five little ones. My mom had asked her parents, my grandparents, to move up from near the Albany area. And it was about a 1 hour move for them. And it was a move away from everything that they had already known. They grew up in the Albany area. They got married in the Albany area. They raised my mom and her twin brother in the Albany area. And she said, I need your help. I have five kids, help. And they told her, okay, you may regret asking us that. So let's give it a year. And if you still want us to move up, we will do that for you. So a year went by. She had about 1.5 acres of land. A year went by and she said, no, I would really like you guys to move up here. And so they built a little house on her property. So they were right across the backyard from age 6 to when they both passed away. So they were right next door, helping with everything from we had sleepovers over there to if we forgot things at school, both of them were there just to be another set of hands, eyes, hearts for all of us. So we didn't have a lot, 5 kids and a school nurse, didn't have a lot of money, but we had enough. And mom was just, she had, once my grandparents moved up, she started the local library and she was a school nurse. So she knew everyone in town. And we lived right down the road from the village cemetery. So she was on the cemetery committee and she really tried to be a part of the community while still raising us. She was always there for us, of course, to the point where, and I had mentioned this in the book, she would see, I would say not at risk children, but really good kids that had a really crummy home life.
Mm.
And they would come and live with us for a year, 2 years.
Wow.
My 2 oldest sisters went off to college and she had a couple beds. And all of a sudden it was, well, Mary's moving in for a little while. And we all thought, okay, here comes someone that was a couple years older than my sister Kelly, probably 6 years older than me, and just needed a stable home life. And so my one parent was actually enough for 2 parents and actually took on the parenting roles of some other kids that she could tell the good kids. She was the school nurse and she would see these kids. So she knew the bad kids. She wasn't ever going to bring any of the troublemakers in, but she could really see the kids that just needed an adult that cared about them. And so people would, not many of them, 4 to 5, I think, over the course of when I was at home, but a person that was in my grade, a person that was in my brother's grade that was just hanging out with the wrong kids. And so she brought him in and you played by her rules in her house, but she gave him that stability that every kid needs. And so when people say they're sorry that I lost my dad, I say, well, I never really had a dad, but I had a mom that was apparently more than 2 parents in some people's households. So she really, everything she did for us as her kids. And yet she still had the capacity to help others out as well. So any essay for college that said, who's your biggest role model? Who's the strongest person you know? That was a home run because I could just talk about mom all day. So yeah, we grew up with each other and not a lot more, but we always had great Christmases. She really just took care of all 5 of us and made sure that we worked for what we got, but that we never wanted for anything.
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful lesson. And the way that there were 3 words after I had read your book that I wrote down that described your mom. And these were words that you used in the book, which were love, security, and safety. And these 3 things are what we all desire probably most. And just to provide that safe space to be authentically us and to feel held and understood and seen and heard. And the fact that you, as her children, were witnessing this happen around you, What a gift. How did you feel in the moment while it was happening? Did you ever resent it, or was it a fun experience for you?
For me, I'm gonna say it was par for the course.
Yeah.
What's strange is I couldn't imagine it probably wasn't legal. It probably if the parents had come and stormed her door and said, "Give me my child back," I'm sure she would have said, "Here you go." She
Yeah.
wasn't forcing anyone to do anything. The sad part is no parent cared enough that they came and stormed the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the kids, I mean, to this day, the 4 or 5 still send her Christmas cards. They
Mm,
still call her up when they're in town because she provided what they needed most at that moment.
mm.
For us, I mean, I was used to kids all over. Being one of 5, you never really had your own space. You shared everything. Everybody kind of was respectful of everybody else's stuff for the most part. And so when people came in, whether it was for a month or 2 months or 6, however long they were going to stay, I don't remember it. I don't know that I was excited or I don't know that I was resentful. It was, oh, okay, here's somebody new that is going to live with us for a little bit. And we
Yeah.
just accepted that this was something that you did for somebody that needed help in that moment.
What a wonderful lesson. And you mentioned, I think this is a great segue into her warm legacy. So you use the term warm legacy in your book. Can you describe what a warm legacy means to you?
Sure. So as a financial advisor, people will say, "Oh, I want to leave a legacy to my children. How do I do that?"
Mm,
And usually they're talking about money. How much can I leave to my kids and how can I invest this for my kids? And I want to leave each of them a house. I want to So when you're legacy planning from a financial perspective, it's all about money. But I wrote this book because my boys never met my poppy. He was gone before they came into the picture. And they recognize the value of his stuff through my house, his fishing lures. And there's all sorts of random fishing stuff and different things and I'm looking around my office, like I have him and my grandmother's wedding picture over here and different pictures that are also in the book. But they know how valuable that is to me, and so it's valuable to them. I call it a cold legacy or a cool legacy is the money aspect.
mm,
Everybody wants to leave a legacy, and you can have a will and pass down cars and houses and money and 401ks and IRAs and that's great, but money is fairly short term. You invest it and then you kind of forgot where it came from down the road. My grandmother, and I keep saying my grandmother, we called her Bam only
mhm.
because my oldest sister couldn't say grandma. So it was Bam and Poppy. We had said that they should put that on their license plate because it sounds like fireworks. Bam and Pop,
Cute.
right?
Yes.
But she passed away second. And
Mm,
so when she passed away, they sold her house across the backyard and we all got X $1,000 from mom said, "Well, I don't really need this money. I'm going to split it amongst the 5 of you." And I think she kept some. And we all got however much and we all used it for whatever it was. And I honestly don't really even remember what I used it for. This was in my mid 20s and I'm sure I used it. It was very important back then. But when Pop passed away, his legacy was in all these memories.
mm,
And financially, you can leave a legacy, but from my experience, it's forgotten in time. And it
mm,
certainly isn't going to be passed down to the next generation. But a warm legacy, when you can have someone, I wrote the book because Poppy at this point had been gone for more than he was in my life. And yet, when I talk to my mom on his birthday every year, we get choked up. And this is 27 years later, right? And we still get choked up. And I still look at his pictures and I still get choked up. And that's the kind of warm legacy that you want to leave. It's based on memories and it's based on experiences. And it may be based on things, but it's things that were so important to him that I feel honored to have them in my house. It's
mm.
not based on things, a sports car that was $100,000 or something. So it's warm in that kind of warms your heart and it makes you cry
Mm.
versus cold, which is money that's going to be spent and you're going to forget about it in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. As I kind of reflect on the 5 Poppy principles in the book, there were moments during the book where it was really heart-wrenching for me. And I grew up very close to my mom's side of the family. My mom is the youngest of 6 siblings. So she had 3 other sisters, 2 brothers, and we were very close to my grandma and grandpa on my mom's side. And we all spent so much time together. And I think I get emotional about it now is that I think why family is such an important value to me is because that was really an important time in my life when I was able to connect with cousins and aunts. And I wasn't expecting this. Wow. Oh, this hasn't happened to me before.
It's all good. I know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of holding myself back too, because that's what happens. But that's the legacy. Not that you want someone to cry, that you want people to cry because they miss you, not, but the
Right.
fact that they left a legacy that's so powerful that can drive someone to cry however many years later because they miss you. I mean, who wouldn't want that? And that was
Right.
one of the reasons that I wrote the book. I found that I always like writing. A math geek who likes to write, I think, is a little bit of an anomaly, but I did one of those disc things, and apparently I'm like high in 3 of them, which is not usually the way things are for math people. But I wrote the book just because I had wanted to write something, but it hit me that he had been gone.
Mm.
And I would be crying, and I'd be looking through his fishing vest and his lures and things like that. And I thought, and I kept saying to my mom, what did he do that did this?
Mm.
What on earth did he do that makes both of us cry when we start talking about him? And my mom is now 85, and she would say, I just hope my grandkids remember me.
Yeah.
I just hope that I want to leave something like that, was what she, and so we'd say, well, what did he do? And then we'd say, oh my God, well, he'd go outside and watch the geese fly overhead every year. Every time you'd hear honking, he'd get up from wherever he was and he'd go outside. And it's these quirky things, but then we start laughing through the tears, right?
Yeah.
And you just have these memories. And I kept thinking, okay, well, what did he do that was so special? And that was sort of the impetus for the book, is I started writing down every story that made me laugh, made me cry, made me mad, made me remember. And they fit into these 5 principles.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's got those people in their lives. I don't cry when I talk about Bam, but I cry when I talk about Pop. And more than one person in our family cries when they talk about Pop. And so there was something special about him. But I find that when I was talking about the book, people reacted the same way that you did, is it brings someone to their mind that's that person for them. And it makes you think, what did they do that makes me so emotional and still miss them so many years later? I still hear the geese and I think Pop should be here to see these guys, right? And it's the quirky little thing, having these quirks, right? Which is one of the principles. You gotta have your quirk, right?
Yeah.
But it's those little things, but all those little things are the big things. It has nothing to do with
100%.
money, because I got no money when he passed away. But it was these things that he did that I don't even think he knew he was doing. It was just him. But it resounded with me, and it seemed to resound with anybody that I talked to, because they could come up with that one super important person that they miss, or that they say, that's going to happen for me when so and so passes away. Everybody's got those 1 or 2 people. And so I decided, well, I'm going to put myself out there and tell these family stories. And I didn't let anybody in the family read the book until I published it, but I did let my mom read her chapter to make sure that I wasn't overstepping any bounds. And she said that it was fine. So that was why the book came into being, is just it resonated with so many people, because they all could think of that one person that they missed, or that they would miss desperately once something happened to them. And so I've published it last year, self-published, included a bunch of pictures. I said it was the feel-good book of the year, right?
The feel-good book of the year. That's so true.
Yeah. So the first chapters were a little, I would get text from people that said, okay, I'm crying here. Please tell me this gets better. Right. And they do. As the book goes on, it gets a little
Yeah.
funnier. The
Yeah.
stories get funnier, and it ends definitely on the higher note. But the first couple are the heart-wrenching, the when he was really there for me. And of course that opens myself up to people knowing things about me that I'm not going to just share at a cocktail hour.
Sure.
But it was worth it, and just to get the stories out there and to be able to share him with whoever reads the book, that was important.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful because I've also am considering writing a book at some point in my life. And there are different reasons behind why people write books. And in some cases, people just write books because they want to have something written, something tangible that they can share with their family around their experiences and their family values, and something that they can pass down from generation to generation. And those memories won't get lost. And that's what I really felt about this book. But to your point, it's so resonant. As I was mentioning, my mom being the youngest of six and just spending a lot of time with my mom's side of the family and cousins and my grandparents and my aunts. And I always say that my three aunts certainly had a heavy hand in raising me as well. And so there are those special memories that I always come back to when I think about the person I am today. And that didn't really seem to happen for me until I probably started having kids of my own, that I started to reflect on these memories and the impact that these other women made in my life.
Yeah.
And my mom's brothers as well, but her sisters were certainly a bigger presence for me. And I value that tremendously. So I'd love to take an opportunity to go through the five Poppy principles and dig a little bit more into that, Sue. So if you can, just go ahead and take us through what those five Poppy principles are and what they mean to you.
Sure. So in no particular order, I think I did kind of the heavy ones up front, wanting to end on some happy notes. And I didn't look at the exact wording, but I can certainly go through them. So spoiler alert, there's lots of stories. So go buy the book. Or I might do an audio. Somebody asked me if I was going to actually read the book, and I thought I might burst into tears during parts of it. But
What's funny about that, Sue, is I follow a podcast, and this woman had a guest on who had written a book, but then also did an audio book on it as well. And she said that there was something so powerful about saying it out loud, like
Yes.
sharing the book out loud, and how healing that was for her, not only for writing the book, but then creating the audio book as well. It was really profound for her.
I just read, we listened to, my husband and I listened to Kara Goucher's book. She was a US marathoner, and she just wrote a book called The Longest Mile about her time with Nike. And we listened to the audio version, and to hear her tell her story. I mean, knowing that it's her voice,
Yeah.
and you could hear her at some point get a little choked up. So maybe I won't promise, but
Sure.
maybe
If it feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. So my Poppy principles, it was like I said, compiling all of these stories, and then kind of some of the stories flowed into a few of the different buckets. So I tried to have 3 or 4 stories in each one, which was fairly easy to do. But the first one is simply to cherish what you cherish. Like, actually let the most important people know that they are the most important people to you. You might think they know it, but to really cherish what's important to you. So from Pop's perspective, he definitely cherished my grandmother. He cherished all of us kids. I think he saw himself as the male role model for all of us, which he loved. I mean, he loved to goof, but he was the grandfather, right? So he goofed around with all of us, but he truly cherished us, and we knew how important we were to him. He also cherished this green wheelbarrow that he wheeled all around the yard. And I mean, this wheelbarrow, if it rained, the wheelbarrow was in the garage and the car wasn't, right? This is how important this wheelbarrow was to him. And he used to give my brother and I rides in it, but it's those things like he loved his shed. I mean, there were these quirky things that he truly loved, but you knew how important that was. And so it doesn't necessarily mean people. It could mean that there's one picture or a bookshelf or some trinket of some kind that is it's very important. And it's nice to be able to tell the story to others of why it's so important and show people that this is of importance to you. Walk the walk, talk the talk. He never said, I love my wheelbarrow, but he painted that thing every year and it never was out. It's these funny little things, but the things that were important to him, including all of us, we all knew how important we were just based on his actions and based on his hugs and based on how he interacted with us. And he told us. I mean, he was always giving us hugs and telling us that he loved us. He was very warm and fuzzy, which was awesome. So that's the first one is if something's important to you, if it's a person, make sure that they know they're that important to you. But if it's a thing or some kind of object that has some kind of special sentimental value, make sure that other people know that, because when you're not around anymore, somebody's going to want that because they knew that that was important to you, which then makes it important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like all Pop's fishing lures, they were important to him. His fishing vest, he loved going fishing. So I have a bunch of his lures at this point. My boys all know that those are Poppy's lures. So if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, they know that they would split up those lures and those would be special to them because it was special to me, because it was special. Right. So just being able to tell stories about why things are special or communicating that they're so special is critically important, because I think from the business perspective, no news is good news. And you might criticize or you might be down on someone, but you should also flip it around and say when they've done something good, or when you can just tell them, I'm always in your corner. I totally respect what you're doing. I totally admire you for this. And I don't think we do that nearly enough. So
and
you
that's
just
really
don't want anybody to not know how important they are.
Yeah. And that's such an important point that really stuck with me when I read that you always tell your two sons that you're in their corner and that you're there to support. And I also definitely want to talk about those vent sessions that you've come accustomed to. Yeah, that are really powerful and helpful and really a moment to connect too, without, like you had mentioned in the book, without trying to fix it or judge it. I'd love to get to that. But coming back to Poppy and the principles, one of the things that I thought was really sweet was the fact that you still have Poppy's wheelbarrow in your yard.
Do.
Yeah.
I do.
And you paint it every year. Tell us a bit about how he took care of this thing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, so Mom didn't really want to give up all of his stuff because, of course, Poppy's very important to all of us. But at one point when I was home, she said, you can have Pop's wheelbarrow if you want it. And we were there with Dan's truck. And I said, of course, yes, the wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Gimme, right? So we brought the wheelbarrow back and I have painted it a bunch of times. I will admit it has been out in the rain. And I feel like he's like looking down at me like, get that out of the rain.
Garage.
I know, but we painted it with we replaced a few of the boards. We painted it with waterproof paint, and so it's happily outside with bright yellow flowers in it. Because I want it to be out. I want people to see it. We have our own wheelbarrow, but I can't not put that out there. So my grandmother had a bench that my mom gave to us. So the bench and the wheelbarrow are kind of together with a couple of his fish buckets and flowers and things like that. So I do have the wheelbarrow. It has been outside, but I have been taking care of it. So I figure that's good. I'm hoping that's good enough.
I'm sure it is. Let's talk about Poppy principle number 2, being present. What does that mean to you? Yeah.
Well, being present, especially in this day and age with everyone, you could be in the same room and everyone's got their face in a phone or their face in an iPad or their face in a computer. And sometimes they're even texting each other from across the room instead of actually having conversations. We didn't have any of that when we were talking late 70s, right? But whenever you walked into a room with him, you were the most important person in the room.
Mm.
He loved his grill. So he would grill. Sundays, we always had dinners with all of us, my mom and Bam and Poppy. And we always ate at 1 o'clock. I don't know why. Sunday dinners were always at 1 o'clock. But he would throw something on the grill. He was in charge of the grill. My grandmother was in charge of everything inside. And if he was sitting outside, I'd go run across the backyard to play cards with him, or he'd give me the funny pages in the Sunday paper. But I would sit outside and I would just hang out with him. And he might ask me questions. If I was chatty, we could just sit there in silence if I wasn't. But if I started talking to him, the paper was folded, it was put down, and he was 100% engaged with what I was saying.
Mm.
It wasn't, and every once in a while, sure, let me check on the grill. He'd check on stuff, but he was very 100% focused on me. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't, from my perspective, the worst thing that someone can do if I'm in the middle of a story is to suddenly pick up their phone and start
Right.
texting with someone else.
Sure.
Right?
Mhm.
Because you aren't heard
Mhm.
and you're not respected and you're not cherished. Right? So being present in all aspects of everything, if someone is taking the time to try to connect with you, the least you can do is give them your attention and be present. So when the boys come home, that's one of my favorite times, is because they're older now and grown and flown. But when they come home, we play cards. And they might look at a text, or I might look at a text if we're sitting there playing euchre. But for the most part, we're just chit-chatting and enjoying each other's company. And it's so nice to just be unplugged at
Mhm.
that point and to be present, because it doesn't happen enough and it ends way too fast. I mean, you have little ones. Pretty soon they're not going to be around. And I tell people that have maybe 2 and 4 year olds, and they say, "Oh my gosh, that's a long time away." It really isn't. And so just to make sure that if one of my kids are trying to connect with me, because I do cherish them, I want to be present for them to make them feel valued and cherished and loved. And so being present is just unplugging and experiencing what's around you, because if you don't look up once in a while, you're going to miss something. I think that's a Ferris Bueller quote. I mean, if you don't if you don't stop and look around once in a while, life's going to pass you by or something.
Right.
So
Yeah.
being present, especially now, just with all the electronics and
Mm.
social media
Mhm.
and Snapchats, and you can find that you can go such down a rabbit hole and you lose 3 hours because you're poking around in an Instagram account, right? So it's really just a matter of unplugging and focusing on the person that's trying to connect with you.
Mm. And this principle was something that I really spent time reflecting on, and how I'm showing up for my two daughters. And there were moments where I was like, okay, I definitely make it a point to, when they walk in the door, to see them, to hear them, to smile at them, to present this sort of energy of excitement, enthusiasm for them being here in this space and us together as they walk in the door. Do I get it right every time? No. But I try to be aware of it. And also taking that time, I'll give each of them a day. So we'll go out and spend some time independently. So my oldest daughter and I, she has a handful of things that she wants to do with me for the day. My youngest daughter has some things that she wants to do with me for the day. So I started to reflect on those, because it's easy to be like, oh gosh, I need to be more present. I don't do this and I don't do that. And it's easy to kind of be critical of yourself in that way. But I tried to take a pause and realize, like, no, I am showing up for them in these particular ways. Life does get busy. So again, it's so easy to be critical about how we're not showing up, but really taking the time. And even if you have to write those memories down, similar to what you did, Sue, is like, what really made the impact, and how, just as a good reminder of how you want to continue to show up for the people that matter most in your life, or how you want to just be present with the people that matter most in your life, I think is such a beautiful practice.
And it's not that you need to, every waking minute of every waking day, be in their face. And that's
We all
not what
need
it's about.
space.
There are countless hours just over at Bam and Pop's house, and he'd be watching the news.
Yeah.
Or watching the Three Stooges. He loved the Three Stooges. So it wasn't that we were having these deep and meaningful conversations every single second. But you said you have a day for your daughters. He took me out for my birthday every year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just us. And from the minute when he got dressed up and I got dressed up and we went to this, what I considered a fancy place, it was the fanciest that you could get in upstate New York. But I had him for 2 hours.
Mm.
And I had his undivided attention and we could order anything we wanted. And he asked me anything. And I had 8 to 10, how many secrets do you really have? Right. So I would just chit chat. But he was my favorite person in the world. And just to have that focus
Yeah.
for that. But every year, he's, where are we going for your birthday this year? I mean, and he gave me his time explicitly every year around their anniversary, which the
Bam
he used to
wasn't
tell my
happy about.
grandmother, I can't take you out for our anniversary because I got to take
Right.
Susie out for her birthday, which definitely did not endear me to my grandmother. And then don't worry, he ended up taking her out for their anniversary, but he kind of would say this in front of me and then chuckle, right?
Mhm.
Which made me laugh. But it was just it was things like that. And that's what they'll remember, the positive energy. If you have a crummy day, your girls are going to remember that seeing them might have brought you up from a crummy day too,
Mhm.
right? It's like, oh my gosh, thank God you guys are home because I had all this crummy stuff happen. So but just being able to focus when they need you, they're going to remember that, and they'll remember your days with them. I mean,
Oh.
that's a key part. Yes.
And I think something else that came up for me also was a proud moment that I recognized in the way that I show up for the girls is slowing my pace of life down. And this is something I did not realize would hit me until I had had kids and we were kind of in the thick of it. We had 2 kids and life was getting busy, and it was really important to me that I have the time and space to be available to them and really be able to support them in ways and show up for them in ways that I knew I wasn't going to be able to if I stayed on the path I was on. And
Right.
so that's really a proud moment for me to kind of pause and be like, wow, this is not working out. And again, I thought I was going to be able to do all these things and have kids and have this career. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, 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 you sort of reassess those values and you start to release things that aren't serving you anymore, and then finding tremendous value and bliss in the things that you did not realize would bring you
Right.
the bliss and the excitement and the happiness that it does. So yeah. What about Poppy principle number 3, which is taking time for yourself?
Yeah, and I think we just touched on that. You don't need to be everything to everyone else all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's not that you should put yourself in seclusion unless that's what you want to do, but having things that again are things for you to do that are important to you is just as critical as being there for other people.
Mhm.
So Pop, he used to go downstairs and work in his workshop. I like to go out for runs or for walks with the dog, or I like to read my books on the couch. I mean, there's certain things that you do to fill your own cup up, because if you're just giving and giving and giving to everyone else, you lose yourself.
Mhm.
So what are they going to remember you for? Being there, but then they're not ever going to know what was important to you for you,
Mm.
right? So with Pop, I mean, he loved fishing, he loved being down in his workshop. And so when you could be there with him during his special times, that made it all the more important because you were allowed into his little world of
Mhm.
something that was important to him, not because of you, but because of him. So that's why the lures are so important to me. Our family vacations were going up to Lake Champlain. We had my dad's side of the family living up there, which is in way upstate New York. And so all of us kids and my grandparents and my mom would go up there, we'd go fishing. And Pop would go out before the sun was even up. And you could just hear his little fishing boat putzing away. And he'd go out and fish for an hour or two. And then he'd come back. And then we'd all go out, all 8 of us in his little boat, we'd go out for the day. But he loved just going out there first thing in the morning. And every once in a while, he would invite one of us to go with him.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that he was being present for me. It was that I was being invited into something that was cherished for him.
Mm.
So like I said, these principles all sort of bleed together when you
Yeah.
start talking about them. But if you're constantly giving for other people and it doesn't bring you joy or it doesn't fill you up, and you're helping them out because they need you, and you're not taking time to just be in the silence of yourself or do something that you care about, I just think you're going to run out of gas. You're going to run out of steam.
A
And
hundred
so he was
percent.
great when he was there for us, but there were times when I'd go over and he would be down in the workshop, and I'd go down and he wouldn't really say anything to me. I'd spend 5 minutes and I'd clear out. It wasn't that he wasn't present for me when I needed him, but this was his time.
Right.
So it is a balance. You don't just always want to do things for yourself, but you also just can't always be present for everyone else. You do need to figure out what brings you joy, what inspires you, and make sure other people know that, but have some things that are yours instead of just having everything that's everyone else's.
And I also think it's such a good lesson to show. For example, I have in the morning kind of like this sacred hour, I call it, where I get up early before the house does, and I do things that inspire me. I read, I study, I meditate, I go to yoga, I do things that really prepare me for my day. So, in me doing these things, allows me to also teach my daughters that it's important for you to have your time. It's important for you to have boundaries. That way you can fill yourself up in order to give more to other people. You can't give away what you don't have. And so what a great lesson to share with our kids or just share with people we love, the importance of doing things that fill you up and that bring joy and inspiration to your life. And what a great lesson in a way of this is how we create boundaries. And this is important to me. And this is sort of like a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable, really. And it's like, and then my kids now, they understand that and they respect that most of the time. But, and to your point, I really love my kids are starting to get to the age where I can begin to invite them along with me to things that inspire me, like an outdoor yoga class or something like that. So that's so
Yes.
much fun too. And I think it makes it more fun to them for them as well, to your point, because they know that I cherish that and that it means a lot to me. And that them being able to come along with me is me telling them that I cherish them with me in this moment that I really enjoy for myself as well. I think that's
Yes.
amazing. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So it's just a little bit of a balance, but letting other people into your magical hour. Or when I was running, I would say to the boys, "Do you guys want to come ride your bikes with me?" And yeah, because that's not something that I offered a lot.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was my time away from them, to be
Right.
honest,
Yeah.
because being a parent is a lot, and you don't want to just have fake enthusiasm and like I said, be in their face all the time, and to try to be the best mom means giving them some space too. You don't necessarily need to be talking to them and solving the problems of the world. You could just be sitting quietly in a room if you're meditating or doing yoga, and they come in and are on their iPad, but they're just in your space, but quiet and respectful. I mean, that's a win for you because you still have your quiet time, but that's a win for them because you're inviting them into a time that you really kind of like being alone, but you understand they respect that. So
Right.
yeah, it's whether it's a retreat or whether it's exercise or whether it's getting up early and listening to podcasts, it's doing something just for yourself where you choose to let people in if you want to, and if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. What about number 4? Don't take life or yourself too seriously.
Well, I already told you about Pop joking around with my grandmother and not threatening to not take her out to her anniversary dinner. He laughed all the time. Well, unless he was swearing, but we'll talk about that one next. He just he was Dutch. He had snow white hair and bright blue eyes and would have been a great Santa if he had a beard. And he just radiated happiness, especially with us because we were the grandkids, right? I mean, it maybe wasn't like that for my mom and my uncle because they were his kids, but he just had such a sense of humor, even about himself. He would tease my brother and I, but it was never a hurtful thing. We would trip and he would laugh, right? And then we would start laughing. Or he would make jokes at dinner time or sneak us some cookies and chuckle, right? But he never took himself very seriously either. My grandmother was German, so she was just, and that's, I don't want that to come across as bad, which it wasn't because now I'm German, but she was not as overt with her feelings. She was much more, she tended to be more serious. She didn't, I actually don't even remember her laughing a lot. Like she was just very serious, probably because she had to run the house and everything, and Pop could just play with us.
Yeah.
So they were definitely two distinct personalities, but he was just a magnet because he didn't take life very seriously. One of the stories in the book is when my oldest sister forgot her band uniform, and we always called Pop whenever we forgot anything because he lived right across the backyard and he could go find it and then bring it to the school, whether it was homework, band equipment, shoes, anything, lunch, whatever we forgot. He was our Poppy taxi. And so my sister forgot her band uniform and he went over to get it, and he shows up in the high school and puts her hat on and carries in whatever she was playing at the time and walks into the office and says, "Where's the parade?" Right? And everybody just started laughing. Like, here's this 60-year-old guy with a band hat on his head. But that was what he did. He didn't make us feel bad for forgetting our stuff. He brought laughter into uncomfortable situations, which helped all of us realize it's okay to have forgotten things. It's okay to have tripped over air and just been running across the backyard and totally face planning, not for anything because other than you were clumsy, right? But he laughed it off, and he laughed things off for himself. I mean, he told us that he couldn't ride a bike, and so we were all taking bets as to whether he could ride a bike or not. He kept saying he couldn't, and we got him to get on a bike, and he literally rode the bike right into a pine tree. And we were all hysterical, and he came out of that tree after a couple swear words, and he just started laughing. He says, "I told you." And we couldn't breathe for like 5 minutes because there he was riding his bike into a pine tree. So he tried things and he laughed if they didn't work out, which was just a great lesson as a kid to just nothing is the end of the world. You think things are the end of the world when you're in the middle of it. And generally 2 days, 2 months, 2 years later, it wasn't that big of a deal. Because even today at 53 years old, I may only be halfway through my life. And that's a really weird thing to think when you're in your 40s or 50s. With everything you've been through, you may only be halfway through your life. So there is nothing that is so critical that you can't find some good in, because in time it won't be, right? So he just kept us all laughing. And why wouldn't you want to hang out with someone that laughed at everything?
And again, another great reminder for me, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners too, because it's always so easy to kind of get into that rigid place and the doing and the catching up and the to-do lists and the kind of that type A personality is how I run. So I really have to work at bringing awareness around how I want to be lighthearted and how I want to be more playful in life and how I want to bring more calm and levity into the home and what that energy space feels like for me and my kids, and not being so rigid and tense about silly things all the time. It's really a daily practice for me. So yeah. And you also mentioned in the book too, Sue, which is don't be afraid to show up as you are, to show people who you truly are. And the fact that Poppy came out and said, "I don't know how to ride a bike," lent an opportunity for his grandkids to teach him how to ride a bike. Maybe not successfully, but still another memory. Right. And so not being afraid to show up. And this is also something I continue to work on every single day, which was another reason why I even started this podcast, is so I could start showing up in a way that felt authentic to me, and I could begin to kind of use my voice in different ways while also giving other people the opportunity to do the same, because we all just want to be seen and heard in some capacity.
Yes.
And so, yeah, what a beautiful kind of win-win that is. All right. So Poppy principle number 5, which is, this is going to be my favorite. Yeah. Have some vices, or at least a few quirks. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you can say vices, and that just sometimes that sounds very strong. So quirks is even better. And whenever I do something that is one of my quirks, I remind my husband, it's just one of my quirks. And he rolls his eyes and laughs. Right.
Learn
But
to
he
love it
laughs.
about me.
So that's good. Yeah, you need to be authentic. 'Cause I think especially kids recognize when you're not.
Mm,
I mean, that kids are
mm,
drawn to people that are talking to them normally, not people that are gushing over them or throwing
yeah.
gifts at them. So
Mm,
being your real
so
self,
true.
and that includes when you've had a bad day and you are crabby when kids come home, or something bad does happen and you're frustrated and you cry. And I mention the boys just because this is something that I found with them is it's hard to be strong all the time. And it's
Mhm.
exhausting. It's exhausting to not be yourself and to not have your own quirks and to hold back emotions or things that you want to do because you're scared of what your kids might think, what your husband might think, what your friends, your neighbors, whoever might think. And that's exhausting to try to be someone else. And so when we were talking before this and you said, well, maybe we'll talk about Monarch Financial Advisors, but I really want to talk more about your book. I said, the book is me, is Monarch. I've given up trying to be different people and holding
Yes.
things back.
Mhm.
And Pop did that too. I mean, he drank scotch at 8 in the morning out of his coffee cup. I don't know who he thought he was kidding. His scotch looks
There's a picture
nothing
of that
like
cup in the
coffee.
book too.
The scotch looks nothing like coffee. And he had his
Yeah.
Pop coffee cup, which I have, by the way. So that's one of my cherished possessions is it's got a plant in it right now. But he drank and he smoked until he took his last breath,
Mm.
even after my grandmother got bronchitis, pneumonia, and they said, you really should stop smoking for her. He says, well, then I'll just smoke outside. He was borderline diabetic with all the scotch he drank. They said, we're going to you should really cut back on that and you shouldn't smoke. And he says, well, I'm not going to do either. So give me some medicine. I mean, he, he wasn't perfect. He was perfectly imperfect, right?
Yeah.
But boy, if he didn't want to give up his scotch, he wasn't going to give up his scotch.
Mhm.
If he wasn't going to give up smoking, he wasn't going to give up smoking. And he cursed like a sailor, which made us laugh because we were little kids. And he had very creative cursing. But boy, if he was mad, generally he was in the workshop and he'd hit his thumb, there'd be some curse words coming out. We were fishing and we caught an eel. He hated that because they wound themselves all around our anchor. The we used to drop an anchor and fish for perch, and the eels would just go all around the anchor line and get it all slimy, and he'd curse at the eels, and it just but that was him. And as much as my mom and grandmother used to say, Pop, kids are in the boat, that just made him go even. Sometimes he could calm down a little, but boy, if he was mad, it didn't matter, which just made us laugh. So I think in the intro of the book, one of the things I said is, I'm not going to tell you he was perfect because I don't
Mhm.
think you can remember someone that fondly if you think they were perfect. You
Right.
remember them because they were real and
Mm.
because they did have vices and they
Yes.
embraced the vices. I mean, if you're type A, then be type A and make jokes about it. It's like, hey, straighten that fork out on the table, damn it. That's not where the knife goes. It goes on the right side within 2 inches, right? I mean,
Right.
if you can poke a little fun at your quirks, then you don't have to worry about bringing levity to keeping a sense of humor because you're already recognizing what makes you different and what may make things hard, and you just embrace it. Then I mean, if that's a
Mm.
part of you, then you have to embrace it. If it's something you want to correct, if people are not exercising and they want to get a healthier life, sure, then by all means go get a healthier life. I mean, I'm a math geek. I i have no problem being type A and being very technical and goofing around with my engineer husband about standard deviations and everything's at right angles, but we laugh about it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's just how we are.
Right.
My oldest son, it used to take him like an hour to pick a movie that he wanted to watch. And so we tease him to this day. It's like, Doug, can
It's
you
time.
actually decide at some point? And he'll laugh, right? So
Yeah.
it's if you can keep the levity, but just embrace who you are for good or for bad.
Mm-hmm.
This is me, and I think it just makes you more real, and it makes you more lovable, and it makes your legacy be even that more powerful, because no one's trying to live up to this person on a pedestal.
Right.
Nobody's trying to live up to this superhuman person that did no wrong
Mm-hmm.
and that only ate healthy things and never drank, never smoked. And I mean, no, that wasn't him. And I think that's why we loved him, is
Right.
because he was real, and
Right.
but he was who he was, and he didn't apologize at all for what he was.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. There's moments where you're just striving, or maybe even just like seasons of life where you're just striving for that perfection and just having everything exactly where it needs to be and how it should be and how it should look and how it should feel and all. And then you just begin to release that. There comes a time in life where you just say to yourself, wow, this is not feeling right. And this is not who I want to be. This isn't serving me. This isn't aligned with how I want to really show up in my life. And it's funny how when you start to release things, it eases you into your authenticity. The people around you begin to really feel that. My own family, when I started to kind of do things and let things fall away that were no longer serving me or our family. And it brought more calm, more ease, more approachability, all of these things, because nobody's trying to be perfect here. Like, we're all human. We're all just doing the best we can. And why not have some fun while we're at it? It's one of those things where it's like, gosh, why did I have to learn this so much later in life? But it's just the part of the evolution. It's part of the things that we have to learn and unlearn. And I think that your book is just such a wonderful reminder of that. I want to leave time to talk a little bit about your mom, Sue, because I know we talked a little bit about her at the beginning of the call around her taking in and adopting these kids in the school and really nurturing them. And I want to talk more about also her love for reading, and also your love for reading, and her finding the local library, her being a founder of the local library, and how that sort of unfolded, and really just her essence around community impact. Because I really think that was part of, when I read the book, that was part of her warm legacy to her family as well. And I see that in the way that you show up in your community as well. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So when you look at Poppy's principles through the book, all the stories that are in those chapters are about Pop. And then there was a chapter about Mom, and there's actually a chapter about me that I had toyed with sending to the boys beforehand. And then I thought, my book.
There you go. Yeah.
So if they wanted to change something, I tend to not take criticism very well. So I thought maybe I just won't send it to them. So the Mom chapter and the me chapter were more to emphasize that you don't need to start drinking scotch at 8 a.m. to leave a legacy. That was not the intent of the book. So if anybody read it and that's what you took away from it, please don't do that. But it was more just, he had these 5 principles, and Mom didn't have the time to be present with all of us. I mean, she had 5 kids that she's trying to raise as good, thoughtful humans. And she didn't have time to sit on the couch with me and talk to me for an hour about my day. We would sit at the dining room table. And there is something to be said for family dinners. And whether the dinner was 5 or 10 minutes or a half an hour, we were all together at the table, and all 6 of us were together at one point in the day. And that was something that she was adamant about. If we were in sports and somebody got home late, that was different. But for the most part, that was just something that she wanted for all of us, because we were all being pulled 9 ways from Sunday with different things that we were doing. But she did love to read. So one of her ways of taking time for herself was she was an avid reader. And so was my grandmother. So I feel like if you had parents that were readers, you tended to be a reader, and then your kids will tend to read and things like that. So she read up by the pool. We had a pool as kids. And so she would just read up by the pool. So she was a lifeguard as well, because she was up there when we were there. But she just read and read and read. And when my grandparents moved up, she did realize that she was taking them away from everything that they had known for 50 years, 60 years. She was between 35 and 40 when my dad passed away. So my grandparents were 50 to 60, and they uprooted everything and came to Broadalbin. She decided that she was going to put in a library. We didn't have a local library. My graduating class was like 80 people. You have to understand how small this town was, right? Very, very small town. So the American Legion had a building that they didn't use right in downtown Broadalbin, New York, which I think it's got a stop sign. It doesn't even have a traffic light, right? It's a
Yeah.
very small little town. And so she and my grandmother started this library. And my grandfather built the bookshelves for down in his basement, in his workshop.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That
so
wasn't
the
in the
shelves
book.
in the library
Oh,
were
wow.
Pop's. Yep, and still are. So he did that. And then it was a matter of getting the books. And knowing that Mom was an avid reader, I loved to read. And we would go to the bookmobile every month, my mom, my grandmother, and I. And they would pick the best sellers and whatever. And you could essentially check these books out of the bookmobile and bring them to our library. And I used to be able to pick out all the kids' books. So it was just walking into this great big library, and the three of us, three generations of readers, were picking out the books that were going to be in the library, as well as just different donations of books that people would bring in. But we had the best sellers, and we could go down and pick out all the newest books. So it was just, you don't necessarily, I said, a lot of these principles intertwine. And this was a way to do something for herself that she was passionate about. But it was also a way to show my grandmother and I how much she cherished us, because she recognized that my grandmother moved away and that she moved because of Mom. And it was kind of a nod to her to say, let's do this together, because I know you don't have any roots here. So let's start some roots. Right. And so we started the library, Mom and my grandmother, and it was open just a couple hours a day. But the women working at the library were all of my grandmother's little church friends. In the book, I say women like Maud and Elizabeth, right? These older women whose husbands never went to church with them, and they'd all sit together, and they all volunteered at the library. It also helped these women have a purpose and go and work at the library, and they could get their books. Nobody knew that they were combining these principles until the book was written, right? But it was a way for her to combine, like, it's the first three principles all with one fell swoop, because we were all together. I was with her once a month by myself and my grandmother, and it was something that she loved, so she didn't mind inviting us along. So that was one way. She was our Girl Scout leader. We all got our gold awards, which is the equivalent of an Eagle Scout for Girl Scouts. But my sisters and my gold award, the big project, which you always have to have a big project, was doing a card catalog for the library.
Yes, I read about this.
That she created. So I'm like, that was brilliant, because they needed one and we needed a project. And so it was a win-win for everyone.
And they're still using those cards to check out the books. So they don't use a computer at this library, even to this day.
Oh, no. You grab a book, and there's a 5x7 index card, and you write your name and you write the date you took it out and your phone number. And then if it's late, they call you.
I love that. Like, how nostalgic and how like back to basics. I'm like, I want to go to that library.
Oh my gosh. Well, feel free. I mean, there's one main street in town, and it's right there. It's right there.
I'll have no issue finding it.
You will have no issue finding it. No.
Oh, that's sweet. I love that. Yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure we carved out some time to talk about Mom, because she's amazing. Yeah. All right. So I also want to jump to your legacy, Sue. I mean, we could not, this interview would not be complete unless we talked about your legacy and some of the things that you're doing to make sure that you have a warm legacy, especially with your sons and your husband, Dan, and the amazing things that you're doing to make impact in their lives. And you had mentioned a few other things too around your passion for running and exercise and health. So tell me a little bit, and our listeners, around what your warm legacy means to you.
Oh, so now this is where I get.
Now it's your turn to cry.
This is where I get a little teary. My boys are just, they're everything. Kids are everything, and they are just they're two amazing young men. I shouldn't say my boys, but I'll always call them my boys. But after I started thinking about Pop's legacy, it was, well, what am I doing to make sure that my legacy is solid for them?
Mm.
And when they were little, I used to take them, they would ride their bikes when I ran. What I tried to do for them, and I do always I verbalize, or I send them cards, and I tell them I'm always in your corner, always in your corner, always in your corner. I love you. I'm so proud of you. Everything you've done, every road you've taken is the right one. It's the road you're on. And so if it's the wrong road, then get off the road, but I'm right there next to you. And I never ever want them to doubt it. So I do tell them that all the time. And I write them letters and send them cards and stuff. But my legacy for them started, I mean, it started when the day they're born, but you start thinking about it. It probably came to the forefront when I was going through my divorce with their
Mm.
dad. And I mean, that was a rough time on all of us. And I touched on some of that in the book. And when you see your boys crying because of something that you're doing, it kind of rips your heart out and stomps on it. So, but to get the boys through it, and I've always told the boys, you can ask me any question in the world, and I'm going to give you a straight answer. The only thing I will not talk about is splitting up with your dad.
Mm.
That's still true to this day. I will not talk about it. I won't talk to them. I won't, and I won't. But any other question they've asked me, I answer, much to their dismay, because I think sometimes they ask me questions not thinking I'm going to answer them truthfully. And I say, do
Right.
you really want to know the answer to
Too
that?
much information.
And sometimes they backtrack and say, what? No. But at that time it was a very difficult time for all of us.
Mhm.
And that was when I realized that was when you realize you really need to be your true self, because it's really hard to hold in the stress and the anxiety for them, and the worry for them, and the grief, and the tears, and the just when you think it's the worst time in the world, just give it time, and
Mhm.
you'll get through it. But we were all going through it at the same time. And so they saw me cry. They saw me sad. They saw me happy. They saw all facets of their mom, which generally you'd think, okay, for 11 and 13-year-old boys, what were you thinking? Were you really just burst into tears in front of them? Well, yeah, because I didn't want to run out of the room. Right. So
Mhm.
they saw that it was hurting me too. And my girlfriend, who is a therapist by trade, she's big into, I'm not going to say journaling, but writing things out. She's like, write an email, but don't hit send, or write it in Word, and get it out, either verbalize it or get it out, because you'll realize once you get it out, it's not as bad as you think. It's when you hold it in and things fester, and you start worrying about things at 3 a.m. And what if this happens? What if this happens? And if you don't get it out, then it just blows up to so much bigger in your head than it is in reality.
Mm. Right.
And so she had suggested these 5-minute vents, which are thoroughly non judgmental. You aren't allowed to say anything. You just vent for 5 minutes. And I told the boys about, and they both kind of looked at me and said, okay, we can do this. But then I thought, what? I'm going to ask each of them if I can have a 5-minute vent to get things rolling a little bit. Right. So I did. And for both of them, and I don't even remember what I was venting about at the time, probably work, or that a run didn't go well, or something that bothered me that I just needed to get it all out. And it doesn't need to be the end of the world. It doesn't need to be about a divorce, or
Mhm.
about a death, or about something that's crazy painful. It can be that you had a bad day.
Right.
And here's these people didn't call me back, and I didn't get paid for this, and I thought this was going to go through and it didn't.
Mm.
And oh my God, I'm so mad right now. And you might cry a little bit, but you get it all out. And the person that you're venting to says nothing. They listen, and it's non-judge. They don't say anything. They don't judge. It's just that you need to get it out. And then you get a hug, and then you go on your day. So I did a few of them with the boys. And I think my older son approached me first about a 5-minute vent, and he didn't do well on a test that day, and something else had gone wrong. And so he vented, and I don't know what he thought I was going to say, but I didn't say anything. And I just said, well, I'm at the end, I'm sorry you had a bad day. And I gave him a hug, And that was it. And he was just so surprised that that's all it was. Like, I wasn't going to say, well, I think you should have done that because I'm a fixer. So if you give me a problem, I'm going to say, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? And that's not, if you start off with, I need a 5-minute vent, you're not offering suggestions. You're not adding anything. You are just a blank slate for people to throw whatever they need to throw out. And so now both of the boys and I will do 5-minute vents. Sometimes I get a phone call in the middle of the day, Mom, I just need a 5-minute vent. Okay. And off they go. And like I said, it could just be that something frustrated them. But I tell you what, 5 minutes is a long time to actually vent. And I found that if you get to about 3, that initial angst and pent up whatever, by minute 2 or 3, you're already calmed down a little bit.
Right.
And by the end of, usually you run out of things to say.
Right.
By 5.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that really helps with the boys. And again, that wraps in a bunch of the principles. You're being authentic. If you're the venture, you're showing them that you're real. You're showing them either your quirks or things that upset you. You're not being perfect. You're being present with them. They're understanding how much you cherish them because you're trusting them to do this vent. It's a trust thing on both sides. And so I had to open up a little first, but you're the parent. You're not supposed to do that. Well, I have never raised my kids according to what I'm supposed to do. And they are two of the ones that will agree. You're not like other moms. I said, I'm very proud of that fact.
Yeah.
So, but it was just a way for us to connect, and we still do it to that day. So I think the 5-minute vent legacy will continue on because they both really like it. But I'm just trying to, they know about Poppy's stuff. They know about Poppy's wheelbarrow. They know about different things that I put out at Christmas time. I hope they know how much they mean to me. I try to remind them all the time, but we are at full team strength when the two of them are home and we play cards, and I don't see them nearly as much as I want to. One's 4.5 hours away and one's 7. So the time that we are together it's the best time.
Really
ever.
special.
And so I try to grab right hold of that. And I probably a little more overbearing. Put your phone down and come play cards. They're like, Mom, we've been playing cards for 5 hours. Then we all need a break from each other. And that's okay too. But it's been a long road and ups and downs, and starting the business. They've seen me cry. They've seen me scared. They've seen me ecstatic. But it's bravery. It's, I don't know, stupidity. You never know until you try it.
Right. Yes.
And then,
and that's just it, Sue. It's all about just doing what feels right. I operate a lot from my intuition these days. I don't analyze a lot. I mean, I try to make sound choices, of course, but I really just move based on my inspiration. I take aligned action based on my inspiration, my intuition, and where I'm feeling pulled to go. And I just trust that. And even if things don't unfold the way that I'm hoping they will, like my kids are seeing this happen every single day for me as I'm starting new businesses, as I'm starting new projects and podcasts, whatever it is, they're seeing me try and they're seeing me make the attempt. And so I think that gives them possibility. Like that gives them the limitless idea of possibility for them.
Yes.
And that is what's important to me. It's not about getting to the thing or getting to the dollar amount or it's about the process of trusting yourself and proceeding with something that feels heavy on your heart and something you have to pursue. Like that's all. Yeah.
And it's not that, and I'm sure you understand this because you're an entrepreneur. It's not that you're not scared. It's that you try.
Right.
It's that you try it anyway, knowing that you have people around you to help you out. And if you fail, that's okay. And that's a hard thing to teach someone. But and I heard a lot of this when I started my business. Oh, well, you're smart, and of course you did well. Oh my gosh, it's social media, right? Social media paints the picture of everyone. I'm awesome. This business is awesome. My vacation is awesome. And you don't see those nights where you're just thinking, oh my gosh,
what am I doing?
I'm not sure what to, I'm not sure what to do. And so
Yes.
it's not that you're fearless. It's that you're probably very afraid, but you choose to try it anyway because you think it might it might just work,
Right.
right? And so
Yeah.
that's more what I'm trying to teach them is it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel all these things, but if there's something you want to go for,
Hmm.
just let me know how I can help you because I think that's awesome. And even
Yeah.
if you don't hit it, think of all the people that are not trying, right? They're not even trying
Hmm.
because they're scared of what people might think. They're scared to put it on social media because they might fail. Well,
Yeah.
tell me what fail is, right? I
Yeah.
mean, are you really going to fail if you start a business and it doesn't work out? Well, guess what? You tried to start a business. Are you going to fail if you wanted to run a race and you didn't hit that time? No, then it's just learning for the next one. I mean, it's funny, just what, yesterday or 2 days ago, I said the opposite of success isn't failure, it's mediocrity.
Hmm.
Like if you are not willing to try, you're just willing to be okay and live life without big joy, but without big sorrow, you're just insulating yourself. So
Yes.
so try and feel the feelings and be angry and upset and try and just know that I'll do whatever I can do to help you. That's really what I'm trying to instill with them is didn't matter. She was always there for my 5-minute vents. She was there when I needed this. She was there when I needed this. And that's really I just want them to remember me as their biggest cheerleader. I mean, I've done all the parenting I can. They're 24 and 26. I can't teach them anything more at this point. So if you have a 2 and 4-year-old, no. Should you burst into tears every day on them? Probably not. But for where my boys are in their lives and where they were when I was getting divorced, it was very important for them to see that it was okay to be sad and that we were all sad together and we would get through it all together and we would help each other out.
And I
So
think to that point, it's about this is really relative to my idea around being an expander for my kids. And they've expanded me in ways also that they don't realize yet. But for me, being consciously aware that I want to be an expander for them, to show them and model for them that these particular opportunities or desires are available to them if they just want to put forth some effort and try, if that's what they desire to do. And so
yes,
knowing that things are possible, giving people hope, like
yes.
that's where it's at.
No,
Yeah.
it definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to just touch on briefly the Boston Marathon and the Ironman that you completed, because as we talk about fear and leaning into that and really kind of pushing ourselves to overcome and yeah, I suppose like really challenge ourselves in ways that is scary and that feels so far away. But yet, when you get across the finish line, what that feels like. So, you ran the Boston Marathon in 2011 and then the Ironman in 2018. Just if you could maybe just bring the essence of what that meant to you in completing the marathon and the Ironman and how that maybe translated to what we're discussing now about being an expander for our kids, our family, our friends, and how you were able to do that through these two challenges for yourself.
Yeah, so the marathons, I always like to run because it was an easy way for me to I've always liked to eat and I've always liked to have a couple beverages on occasion. So I like to exercise so that I still fit in my clothes. Running was really easy to do, especially when the boys were little, because I could just throw on my sneakers and go. I mean, I didn't have to. I have to be here at 7 o'clock to play volleyball, or I need to be here at 2 o'clock to go to a CrossFit class. I liked running because I could just do it on my own time. So I ran the first marathon I did. I ran for cancer. One of our cousins had passed away from cancer, and I thought, oh, I'm going to train and try to run a marathon. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. I got tendonitis, but I raised all this money. And so because I had a goal and I was accountable to myself and others that had donated, it's one thing to do it for yourself. It's another thing, honestly, when there's a whole bunch of people that know and hold you accountable.
Sure.
That's what I need is to I tell a whole bunch of people because then I can't back out.
Right.
I just know that I would.
Yeah.
Not that I want the easy way, but sometimes the hard way is really hard. So I had run a couple marathons, and then one of my girlfriends and I said we should try to qualify for Boston. So the only way you can run the Boston Marathon is if you run it, and it's based on age. If you run it a particular time or faster, so you have a Boston qualifying time,
Yeah.
or you need to raise enough money through a particular charity. And these dollar amounts we're talking like $10,000 or more. It's not a small thing. So we decided to train for Boston together. And we both qualified, which was great. We did the training together, which was also great. I'd call her up and I'd say, that run went awesome. And she'd say, mine did too. Or I'd say, oh my gosh, I couldn't even make it out the door. And she's like, oh my gosh, that was the worst run of my life. So again, it was kind of these mini 5-minute events before I knew, when we weren't really calling them 5-minute events. So I trained for and qualified for Boston, which was great. So I ran that in 2011, 2012, and the bombing was 13. So yeah, little known fact is the year that the bomb went off, the time that it went off would have been the time that I crossed the line the year before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was I still get goosebumps when I think about that. Yeah. So the marathon was the boys were there. They were in a hotel room. We went with some people in Loveland. Dan was there. He was running it as well. And so the boys and his mom were in this hotel at the finish line, way up on this 10th floor. And so just as I'm running down Boylston Street, there's just crowds, 10 people deep, screaming, yelling. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to see these boys, right? So I look up and sure enough, I see David hanging out of the window.
That's wild.
I was in great shape, and he's looking for me because there's chip timing, which means every 5K you go over a chip mat, and it records that you went over the mat at this time.
Yeah.
So they knew about when I was going to be at the finish line, and they were hanging out the window. David was hanging out the window. I think Doug was on the computer trying to figure out where I was going to be. And so I'm running down this street, and it's just all these endorphins and goosebumps. And I did it, and I just ran this iconic marathon. And Dana's here, and my boys are here with me. And there's thousands of people cheering and yelling. And I'm looking up, and I'm thinking I'm never going to see them. And there's David, right? And I see him, and I'm just freaking out. And I would have cried, but I had no water. I was too dehydrated to cry, I think. So I scream and I call David Mickey. Just that goes back to when he was little, his daycare woman used to call him David when he was good. And when he was not, she'd call him David McDavid. So when I picked him up and I would say, how'd he do? David McDavid was here today. And I thought, oh boy, that means.
Oh.
So then Doug would say, is David being a Mick when he was being bad? Right. And it just morphed into Mickey. So I'm running down Boylston and I see him and I yell, Mick, at the top of my lungs, right? And there's something about a parent and a child that they can hear your voice over the thousands of screaming voices, right? And he turns and I'm waving and gesturing, and he sees me and he freaks out and he yells to Doug, and they're yelling and yelling and they're waving to me out the window, and they're so proud of me that I just ran this marathon, right? Because I had to qualify, and they knew how hard I worked. And every day I was doing all this running. And so I crossed the finish line, and I'm just thinking, this is the best day, right? I just finished the Boston Marathon for the first time. My boys actually saw me cross the finish line, and I can't believe this. And Dan runs way faster than me, so he finished already. He was waiting for me at the finish line. And he's like, you made it. I'm like, that was great. It was my second fastest time. And I'm all kinds of endorphins. And he gets down on one knee and proposes to me.
Whoa. And there's a picture of this in the book too. You have to see it.
Oh my gosh. and looking back, I mean, he just wanted it to be like the best day of my life. And I said, what the equivalent is, like if you take a 3-year-old to their birthday party and everything's going great, and you have cake and you have balloons, and somebody brings a pony, and then all of a sudden a clown comes in, and it was the one thing that my brain I went from best day of my life to like my whole brain just stopped. It was like the one thing that and I literally didn't know how to react. And yes, so he got down on one knee, and I said, are you fucking kidding me?
I'm not bleeping anything out. Yeah.
He said, no. And another one of our running friends, of course, was taking pictures at this time. And my jaw in the picture in the book was him smiling, here's your ring, that
Yeah.
he kept in his pocket during the whole race. And my jaw is
Wow.
open.
Yeah.
Like, I just, what?
I
Right?
don't know how he
So-
ran that race with the ring in his pocket the entire time. Like, bless his heart.
Oh my
Bless his
God.
heart.
Yeah, so that was the end of my first Boston Marathon. And so when I tried to liken it to, I said, it's just when little kids get overstimulated. I said, I
Yeah.
was a however old 40-year-old thoroughly overstimulated.
Yeah,
And you just
I
sent me
bet.
over the edge. So anyway, I did say yes, but it took me a couple minutes to actually register what was going on. The Ironman was a little different. So the Ironman was the culmination of a few things that the boys understood as well. Dan had done an Ironman, and one of his friends had wanted to do an Ironman. And because Dan had run marathons, and then I had run some marathons, and he had gone to Boston, and then I had gone to Boston, he did an Ironman. People kept saying, well, when are you going to do an Ironman? Because I like to ride my bike and I like to swim. And I said, I'll do an empty nest Ironman the year that David goes to college. At that point, David was like 12. But there was enough people that remembered that when David went off to college, they said, so what Ironman are you doing? And I thought, shoot. Right?
You're accountable.
You're I know
You're
I'm
accountable. Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something good for this. I had been running for a woman who had a little girl named Kylie who was born with holes in her heart. And she got an angel heart when she was like 3 months old. And her mom had started this Hearts for Kylie Foundation when her daughter was still around, giving money, character band-aids, gift cards, gas cards to families at Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital, which is where Kai got her heart, an angel heart, which means another child passed away and she got a heart transplant. Right.
Yeah.
I had started running for her on this Facebook group, and I would send her medals. I'd send her pictures of my dog and I running, and it was all great. And then Kai passed away when she was 6 years old. So
Wow.
that and I had never met her, but the fact that her mom threw herself into this nonprofit and kept doing things for the Hearts for Kylie Foundation, even though she just lost her daughter. I mean, talk about inspiration is when the chips are down to try to keep moving forward and keep Kylie's legacy alive. And everything she did, it traces one of the strongest women I know. And so to this day, Kylie's brother, Austin, they've adopted a little girl named Brooke. So, but they constantly, they look for hearts around, and they know that Kai is with them. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do this Ironman and I'm going to raise money for the Hearts for Kylie Foundation. So I got a hold of Kai's mom, and she says, I'd be honored. I'd love that. And so again, put it out on social media. I'm doing this Ironman, going to raise money. And I documented it the whole time that I did it. And it was a lot of training. I mean, if you're training for an Ironman, you give up 6 months of your life. I
Wow.
worked, I ate, and I exercised. That's it. My weekends were long runs and long bike rides. And then I'd go back to work, and people would say, what'd you do? I'm like, I rode my bike and I ran and I napped and I ate. I mean, it was a lot of training. And so you can't really take it lightly if you want it to go well. But out on Facebook, I would say, hey, this was my week and it was great. It felt great. And then there were some weeks that I thought that, and I put out there, this is hard. This is really hard. The runs went good. The bike did not. And was just, again, very honest. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this kind of stuff because it was not easy. And it's not for someone who's just a recreational athlete. It was hard to spend that amount of time exercising.
Sure, to be that disciplined. Yeah.
Yeah, at age 48 or however old I was. So it was hard, but I did the Ironman. Both boys came to Chattanooga to cheer for me. They saw me at the start line, and you got to love kids that are in college with social media, because they're not going to put crap out there that isn't true. They might not put the bad stuff out there, but they're not going to put stuff out there that isn't true. And so I finished I wasn't going to win anything. So I went out there and thought, I just want to finish, and I want to finish strong. And so the bike went really, really well. I ran, walked the run, and I did that really well. And I came in, and I'm convinced that Kai was on my shoulder the whole entire time.
Yeah.
I tend to be spiritual. So I think the Pop was there as well. I saw a bunch of bright red cardinals. He was flying around, but I think that Kai was literally on my shoulder helping me out. So I finish and I'm just, again, endorphins and all the feels. And the boys were just like, Mom, I
Yeah.
can't believe you did that.
Mm.
Right. And they're taking pictures. And David had this whole Snapchat story of the whole day every time I went by.
Wow.
And Dan's grandparents
That's
came
so
down and his
cool.
aunt and uncle and his parents and the boys were there. And I had my own, at first I'm like, I don't want him to come down because I don't want to do bad. And Dan had said, they really just want to come down and cheer for you. And I thought, okay, put your pride away. You have people that are willing to drive like 12 hours
Mhm.
just to be there for you. And once I put it in perspective, is I'm not going to win anything and I can finish this. I've ridden my bike that far. I've run a marathon. I can finish and it doesn't matter how long it's going to take me because I'm going to finish. And it it puts it in perspective that I am strong enough to do that. And it went way better than I thought, which is why I haven't done another one. I just don't want to ever lose that memory of this really actually went 12 hours of exercising actually went very, very well. But
Sure.
I finished and the boys were just, I can't believe
Like
we're so
awestruck.
proud of you.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't, and you look great and you're doing great. And they're taking pictures and my mom's an Iron Man and they were just, they knew how much it took to get there.
Yeah.
And they were so proud and so just, and Doug at that point, who did not like to exercise, Doug doesn't like, is the older one. He does not like to exercise. He says, I want to do an Ironman someday. And I thought, oh, and again, I was so dehydrated, but if I wasn't, I would have cried. But, and he, at this point he's run marathons. He's ridden 100-mile bike rides. I mean,
Wow.
he had a whole plan because I inspired him to do it, which as a parent, I thought I could have keeled over on that day. And you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, but it was, and both of them were just in, I think it, to get to, you just need to get to the finish line, but it's hard along the way. And I
Mhm.
never sugarcoated that it was hard. And it was very, very hard. And it was a lot of weekends given up, which is why I didn't do it until after David graduated. I mean, I only saw him with a divorce 50% of the time as it was. I was
Mhm.
not willing to give up any time with either of them.
Sure.
Oh, I have to go for a 4-hour bike ride.
Oh.
That wasn't going to work. So it was going to be my empty nest Ironman. And the fact that both of them were there, I got done and we ate dinner about 10 o'clock and they both had to get back the next day and they flew out at like 5 o'clock in the morning, but they were there. Right. And so that, to have the running be for myself and a lot of the training be for myself, but they were there at the finish line because they wanted to be there for me. So it just, both of those races, they're not going to come to every race we do because we run a lot of races, but the big ones and the ones that mean something to me, they show up to, which to me means that my legacy is already pretty much in place because
Right.
they want to show up to the things that are really important to me. So I'm doing
Wow.
something right,
So
Randy. I'm doing
yeah.
something right.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And I have to say the way that you authentically connect not only with your family, but with people around you. The day there was this was gosh, so Sue, this was this early last year? And I forget why we had connected. But you had reached out to me, invited me for coffee. And the last 4 years have been in and out of transition in different ways. A huge transition happened for me in my life about 4 years ago. And then ever since then, it's been really a time of kind of exploring and discovering and really kind of finding my way, if you will. And I had just gone through a transition into another role. And I think you were interested about what it was I was doing, which is why we went for coffee. And
Yeah.
I remember we sat there for a while. Like we went for coffee, but we were there for like a hour and a half, 2 hours. I don't even remember how long, but
We were.
I just remember thoroughly enjoying the conversation. Like that was the first time you and I ever met just one on one to hang out. And I just remember walking out of the coffee shop thinking that really filled me up. You know, those meetings with people where you just feel so filled up afterwards and you're just motivated and inspired and encouraged and it just feels good.
Yeah.
I remember walking out of the coffee shop feeling that way that day. And
And
so,
I did too.
yeah. Yeah. And it was just there was such a strong connection and it felt so authentic. And we were being so real and honest with one another in our life experiences. Like we just went there. And
Yeah.
I think that those are like the best conversations I like to have. Hence was why I've even started this podcast as well, is because I love having those sort of conversations, like those real, authentic conversations where you get to know someone and deeply. And so I thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, I thank
I
you too.
appreciate
Yes,
you for
I
that.
remember that conversation. We were on the couch at mile 42,
Yeah.
and it was just, yeah, in order to connect, you need to open yourself up.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to being a real person and not putting on airs and not coming across as this is Sue from Monarch. And no, I'm not going to show any emotion other than a smile because then they might not like that I have feelings. I mean, that's never been the way that things well, and maybe that comes with age. Maybe I was like that when I first started out, but I you just you can't connect and you can't make someone feel appreciated unless you put your own self out there.
Right.
And again, it was that we were listening to each other and
Hmm.
asking follow-up questions. And we went off on tangents, but we were both there together and neither
Hmm.
one of us were it was just a really yeah, it was a very positive interaction because we were both just focused on what the other one had to say. And I mean, you inspired me with what you were doing and taking that risk to change careers, which is what you were doing at that point. You were going
Yeah.
to go and try something different, but you were so excited about it
Yeah.
that it was hard to feel anything other than your excitement and know that boy, I want to at least be part of this or make sure that I keep track of how she's doing because
Hmm.
this is something that she's so excited about. And most of the time jobs aren't exciting
Right.
for for
Yeah.
people, but you were taking a gamble and doing something different. And but that yeah, that the pure excitement that you were giving off was a lot of fun. That was a great conversation down there.
Yeah, it was. It was, yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful moment. And yeah, so thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged you for that and to make sure that you knew how I felt when I walked out of mile 42 that day. So,
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And I think it was even really packed that day. And we just happened to find the spot on the comfy couch. I mean, how serendipitous is that? Like, yeah. So we got nice and cozy for our awesome conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so before we wrap up here today, I would love for you to let folks know a little bit more about Monarch Financial, how you came up with the name, because as you said, you are Monarch Financial. Monarch Financial is you. And so I'd love for you to tell our listeners how you came up with the name and what inspires you in this work that you do and the services you provide. Yeah.
Sure. So my mom needed something to keep all five of us busy in the summertime since we weren't in school. And we had the pool where she'd go out and read, but there was milkweed all over, and there was a lot of monarchs all over up around where I grew up. So she would get mason jars out, and out in our screen room, she would put all these mason jars out on the table. And at the end of July, beginning of August, we would go around to all the milkweed and look for monarch caterpillars. And they're little yellow and black guys. If you caught them little, they're teeny teeny, but we would see them when they were maybe an inch or two long. And we would bring them in and put them in the mason jars with milkweed. So they would still be munching on their milkweed. And as the caterpillars got bigger and bigger and bigger, all of these mason jars we put aluminum foil over the top and poke holes in it so that they could breathe. But when the caterpillars got big enough, they climbed to the tallest point and they spin a cocoon. So these caterpillars would climb up the side and spin their cocoons, and the cocoons start off as green. And then as they turn into butterflies, monarchs actually they don't retain anything of their caterpillar stage. They actually just like go into this gel
Hmm.
and then put themselves back together as a butterfly, which I don't know how they do it, but
Blows my mind.
yeah. So it's not that they sprout wings. No, they actually like destroy themselves and then squish themselves back together
Hmm.
again. So the chrysalis goes from green to black, and then the monarch pops out the bottom, and then they're the butterfly with their wings all squinched up because they've been stuck in this little chrysalis for a while. And so as their wings are drying and as they're fanning their wings, you could hold a butterfly. in your hand. And he'd be crawling around and waving his wings, trying to get them dry. And we would hatch 40, 50,
Oh
60
my gosh.
butterflies. I mean, with
Yeah.
all of this. And every time you'd be holding that butterfly. And then another one of the kids be like, it's my turn. It's my turn. Because everybody wanted to hold the butterfly. Right. And then eventually they just flew away. We did this every summer. And to this day, my mom will say, doesn't everybody do that?
No, they don't.
Nobody does that.
Yeah.
I've done it around here in Loveland, and people are saying, what are you doing? I said, well, that's milkweed over there. You look for the caterpillars. And it fascinates some people, and some people just say, okay, I don't really get it, but you be you.
Mhm.
And so when I was trying to come up with a name, I wanted it to be something that meant something to me, but a strong name because I knew it was going to be financial services and retirement plans. And so it was taking me a while to come up with a name. And the monarchs, their counts had been going down. They migrate to Mexico every year, then they come back up to where they hatched and they lay their eggs. So if you can hatch a monarch, chances are the next year you'll have some monarchs. And that year, when I was trying to come up with my name, it was summer of 2019. And I was at my mom's house. There was this big thing on the news one night about this boom of monarch butterflies that had been flying over Colorado. And people were taking pictures, and it was just tens of thousands of butterflies flying overhead. So I thought, how about monarch? Because it is a strong name. My
It
logo's a
is a strong
butterfly,
name. Yeah.
but it is kind of, it's a nod to her. It's a nod
Mhm.
to my childhood. It's a nod to just becoming a butterfly. I mean,
Mm.
through the divorce and whatever, I've become a different, I'd like to say I wouldn't become a different person, but things change and you
Yeah.
pop out the other side differently.
Mhm.
But still, it's not necessarily bad, right?
Yeah.
And so there was just a lot of things that went into the whole monarch name. So that's where it came from. So that was a nod to my mom and keeping us busy in the summer. You
Not to
know,
all
what
things you, really, which is why I love that you say your monarch is you, because it is a nod to all things you and who
it
you
is.
are.
And
Yeah.
people love that story because they just
Yeah.
think it's, oh, she saw a butterfly one day. And it's like, no, it's a little more than that. And
Yeah.
so when they hear it, they say, oh my gosh, I didn't think they really like the story because I do. I get very excited about it. And so it does mean something to me. The butterfly does mean something to me. Other than it's a beautiful butterfly, don't get me wrong. Yeah. And so, as far as the business goes, I just realized that being an employee of a big business is great, but being on my own, centered in helping business owners do the right thing when it comes to saving for retirement, listening to retirement dreams and how are they going to get there, coming up with which of the retirement options is best for them. I've heard about a 401k. I don't know what that means, but sitting down and just listening, figuring out what's important to them. What do you want to do when you retire? Tell me about all the fun things you want to do and getting them excited about their future and then figuring out how to get them there. That's really what we do in a nutshell. I mean, I know my intro was probably a little bit more formal than that, but it's really listening to, and I'm independent with investments, with retirement plans, with insurance, with everything. I'm not just working for one company. So I can tailor the design to the business owner versus having to put the business owner in one of my 3 slots that I have access to.
Sure.
So it's really about just helping other people get to where they want to be in the retirement space. And everybody loves to dream about retirement, but then everybody gets really worried about retirement and not having enough.
Right.
And so I can help them out with that and say, well, you actually do have enough. Here, we did some projections and that just helps them sleep at night. Or I say, all right, well, you don't have enough to do all of that. So we either need to reduce expenses or you need to make more, or you can't do that, right? I mean, numbers don't lie, but we can come up with a plan. And just having a plan does get people excited about their future. It does get people excited about retirement. And it does, that's what I like to do. I mean, it's not about me, it's about helping them. And that's at where I'm at in my life. I don't have kids that need me anymore. So now hopefully I can say my clients need me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just sort of a testament to how I know you had said that the introduction was formal, and I think all of that had to be said. But at the same time, of course, you carry this lightheartedness around just your desire to really serve your clients in a way that feels good to them. And I know when my husband and I sat down with you, and I always get clinchy around financial things. If you don't know me, like, anything financial, I'm like, I can't. I like my money mind and all of that. Something I'm still working through, everybody. So if anyone is like me, you're not alone. And so it gets me kind of clinchy and tense and all these things. So it was really a challenge to myself to sit down with Sue, my husband, and I, and really kind of formulate this plan for ourselves. And so I sat down with her and I just felt comfortable enough with Sue to say, okay, here's the thing. This is what we desire, but I don't want to feel this way through the process. This really makes me nervous and I don't want to feel as though I'm living in restrictions and like all of these things that just made me tense and just nervous about this process. And you were able to really meet us where we were in the process. And you were patient with us and it felt relaxed. It's like whenever I think of going through a process like that, and we've done this before where we've gone to a bigger company and we've walked into a big conference room and introduced by a man in a suit. And it's like, it just all feels so tense to me. And I'm like, I can't do that again. And this just felt like such a wonderful opportunity to go through this process with you. And it was so relaxed and so comfortable. And there was some work upfront to do on our end. Of course, you have to commit to the process. But once we did, then the output of it was like, this is awesome. Now that we have this set up, now it's just adjusting, editing, check-ins. Like it's great. So I highly recommend Monarch Financial. I can't say that enough. If anybody's out there who just gets tense and anxious and feels overwhelmed, I think is another great word for overwhelmed by the idea of getting all of their finances in order and kind of projections, thinking about their future, give Sue a call.
Yeah, you were not happy. I do remember that first meeting because your husband was really into it.
Oh,
He's
he
like,
loves
okay,
it. He
everything.
loves it.
Everything. And you're like, I said, okay, well, I just need to see kind of your monthly budget so that we can forecast things. And you're like, I can't do a budget every month. I don't want, and I'm like, no, I'm not holding you to a budget. I
Yes.
promise. And yeah, some people get very anxious just because and I tell people, I'm not going to tell you you can't go out for pizza. I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you you can't go on vacation, but I am going to tell you your vacations, you might not be able to go to Disney every year. It might be every other, unless you cut back on something else. I like to give options, but yeah, I do like to say by the end of the meeting, I think you were a lot better. I'm not going to take away pizza night. I'm not going to take away movie night. Go do your things with the girls. We're just going to figure out how to pay for them.
That's right.
And we can do that. We can absolutely do that. But yeah, and I wrote the intro. So if the intro was formal, it's because again, I'm a math geek, but that's okay.
I love it. It's great. It's perfect. Yeah.
That's okay.
Wonderful. Sue, where can people find you?
They can find me. My phone number is probably easiest. It's my cell phone. So you can either text me or call me. That's at 513-502-2637. If you forget that, then just remember Monarch Financial Advisors. That's the website name, and my contact information is out there as well. Or the email is just monarchfinancialadvisors@gmail.com. So I'm in the Little Miami River Chamber. My contact information is there. I'm around Loveland a lot. So generally, if you just remember the butterfly story, someone will say, oh, that's Sue, because I don't think anybody else has a butterfly logo. So
yes,
if you say the one with the butterfly, then usually people will find me, because I think the logo is doing its job. And if people don't remember me, they remember the butterfly, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, wonderful. And we'll put all of that in the show notes as well. So we'll link to your website, contact information, all of that also. And if anybody is out and about in our local community of Loveland, everybody knows Sue. So you will not have a problem finding her. Okay. Well, Sue, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure. I enjoyed this conversation so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon and connecting. And anybody interested in projecting their future dreams and really creating a plan for themselves, their families, reach out to Sue.
I definitely appreciate the opportunity, and it's always fun to talk about my family. I'm very proud of all of them, and to go through my book, which I wrote a book, which it still blows my mind, and I tend to downplay
Amazing.
it, and I'm trying to not do that as much because I think you
Yes.
downplay your own accomplishments and then you
Yeah.
build up everybody else's accomplishments.
Yeah.
So no, it was really fun to talk about my poppy and what he's done, and then but just hopefully you can figure out how to put the principles into your life so that it works for you. So, but no, I appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, you are so welcome. And yes, so everybody, once again, the Poppy Principles, living your life to leave a legacy. Go out and grab it. You can find it on Amazon. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Sue, thank you so much. You're an inspiration, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. You inspire me as well. You have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
All right, everybody, until next time. Bye bye.
Bye.
That's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you'd like to learn more about Consciously Inspired Minds, you can visit us at consciouslyinspiredminds.com. Until we connect again, explore what inspires you.